Good afternoon, all, and welcome to Vision New England's monthly free webinar series. We're glad you're able to attend, and we're excited to have Jack Richardson with us this month, and he will be talking about the Strategic Leadership Network and particularly how you can maximize your Global Leadership Summit experience. My name is Mike Froning, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Director at Vision New England. And before we get started, we'll have a few quick logistics. We'll start promptly at noon, maybe a little late, and we'll end at 12:45. If you have questions, the presenter would like to wait to the end, so if you have questions, there are a couple things you could do. On your toolbar, you'll notice a little hand character on your icon. If you click on that, what that will do is let our organizer know that you want to ask a question, and we'll click on you at the end of the presentation. And also, you can type out a question on the bottom of your panel. You'll see a box where you can type in a question, and we'll have that answered as well. Try not to use the chat for specific questions. If you have more of a logistical question, you can use that chat box. Enough of me. Why don't we move forward? Jack Richardson is here. He's got over 20 years of experience in ministry and organizational management on a business end, and we're really fortunate to have him. So without further ado, Jack, welcome.
Okay. All right, I'm here. Can everybody hear me on that? How's that? Is that better? Great. I'll assume that everybody is hearing me. Is that correct? I'm not getting any feedback from anybody, so...
Jack, you should be good to go.
Okay. Are you hearing me when I speak? Mike, can you hear me when I speak?
Absolutely. We're ready for you.
Okay. Then I will say good afternoon. My name is Jack Richardson, and I'm delighted to have the attendees on board for this webinar. I am the director of the Strategic Leadership Network of Vision New England, and as Mike said, Ryan has asked me to share today what I'm doing in the area of leadership development, specifically as it relates to the Global Leadership Summit that's being held in August, and is videocast from the Willow Creek Church and in the Chicago area and hosted by Bill Hybels. I want to step back for a moment and give a very brief history. So, Mike, if I could have the next slide, that would be great. I joined Vision New England in September of 2000, and my mission at that time was to use the resources of Vision New England to help satisfy the most pressing needs of the pastors across New England as they expressed what their needs were. So for the first 7 years, I did that, and in that time I visited something in excess of 400 churches, and associated with that 400 senior pastors. And I traveled from the northern tip of Maine right down to the southwestern corner of Connecticut. Also, during that time, I delivered 2-day conferences associated with the field ministries of Vision New England, and each of those conferences was tailored to meet the needs of the pastors as they had expressed them from their particular area. And typically, I would run around 3 major conferences per year. And before and after, both in the interviews and in the conferences, I would survey them with a written questionnaire. Basically, I asked them the question, okay, what are your most pressing needs and the issues that are facing you? And boy, did they come back in both situations, both the leadership conferences and the personal interviews, did they come back with answers. If I could have the next slide, Mike, that would be great. Okay, I want to narrow it down, as I said, to leadership development, and one of the top issues that emerged at virtually every time was that one of their biggest challenges was leadership development, and initially they expressed it as leadership development for their own leaders, the deacons, the elders, and whatever leadership in the other leadership in the church. And suddenly something happened that when I said, well, what sort of leadership development are you thinking of? What do you mean by that? It began to emerge that they were really talking about that they were asking for help in their own leadership. And as they expressed it, they wanted leadership that could be taught by themselves to and caught by their leaders. So when I asked them in a straightforward manner, are you really asking for leadership development for yourselves? They acknowledged yes. So prior to that time, I had been attending the Willow Creek Summit just for my own edification, and I found that I found the summits great. I learned a lot, and my metric on success was if I took away two, maybe sometimes three new ideas on how I could lead better, I felt it was a tremendous response. So it dawned on me, well, why don't these pastors use the leadership summits to learn better leadership? So I asked them, and boy, did they tell me. They came back and they said, yes, I used to attend those leadership summits, but I'll tell you, they're too big, they're too flashy, nobody listened to me when I got back to my church, and besides, I'm too busy. So with that daunting response to my humble suggestion, I put my head together with one of my colleagues, and we began to challenge that question. Now, we had been going around and we had been seeing people who were praying hard and definitely very interested in their church becoming successful, but they didn't indicate any indication on their own leadership becoming better until we started to ask them. We've run across a handful, like one, I could count them on one hand, the number of pastors that said, oh yeah, we use the Global Leadership Summit as teaching in our church, and we find it's excellent. So we went back and began to ask ourselves, well, why isn't more of the leadership being used? Why is the leadership principles that are in the summit, why are they not more accessible to the pastors in New England? And how could we make this training, these ideas and these benefits, more accessible to more pastors across New England? And as we began to think about it, we began to believe that we really can remove those three major barriers: too big, no leadership buy-in, and too busy, from those pastors by training. So that is how the leadership, post-leadership workshops began to be offered. Now, when we designed these, we went back. Mike, if I could have the next slide, that'd be great. When we went back, we took each of the major challenges, and the amazing thing to us is we were never given more than three reasons why the summits were not being able to be used. Both during our investigation and frankly in the giving of the seminars over the succeeding 5 years, we have not found virtually any more. But one of the persons put it into really into words very succinctly and very clearly, and I wrote them down and said, okay, that's good information. And basically he said, the concepts at the summit are just too big, they're too flashy, too high-powered, and too expensive for New England churches. Well, okay, that was a challenge. So we went back and said, all right, began to talk with some of them, and we settled on selling the idea of coming up with a very quiet environment where the pastors could focus on just one big idea that they got out of each presentation. And 1 month we would do one presentation and they would focus on just one big idea for them. And out of that came tremendous response, because they found that, yeah, there was always one relevant idea. What it really was is they focused on the content rather than the affective display of the Congress, of the summit, which certainly they wanted to put on a very, very attractive show. So that's what we did. We encouraged people to focus on one big idea for each presentation. And what did we find that it was necessary for them to do? Well, we would bring them in, ask them to watch the review again, think in a very quiet environment, and write down, all right, what's relevant to me? Why is it relevant? How would I do this in my church? And where would I do this? Just begin to unpack and write answers to those very simple questions of what, where, how, and why. And over the several hours, we found that indeed the pilot seminar that we did run, they figured out how to apply one big idea to their situation, and were able to document it on 4 pieces of paper that we gave them with questions on, and a very large amount of white space for them to write on. They left the pilot seminar with one big idea written down on a 4-page document for the church, the use in their own church. Okay, Mike, next slide, Mike. Challenge number 2. These were people who were very enthusiastic. They came back and said, yes, I came to the summit, and I listened to the presentation, and I got all psyched up and excited. And then I went back to my church, and I tried to share some of these ideas, and I virtually got no interest. Nobody listened, and I can't implement these by myself, so nothing happened. Their best intentions failed, and they just never went back to the summit. So what we did was go around to some of our pastors who had a good experience using the summit and get an idea. And one of them put it in very strong language. He looked at me dismayed and said, well, for me, in our church, the Leadership Summit is the most affordable, most accessible, most relevant, world-class leadership training event that we can invite any member of our church to. So needless to say, I wrote that down. And we began to make it very easy for the pastors to invite the staff and the leaders to the summit. And as we promoted both the summit and the post-summit leadership workshops, we encouraged them to bring their staff and their leaders. Now, primarily who have responded have been the pastors themselves. And so we have expanded, working with Willow Creek, we have expanded from initially in those days 2 sites to now 7 sites across New England this year. And in our promotion, we have emphasized group discounts, and we have promoted the pastors to bring their people. Now the results have generally, as we expected, that they would bring 5, 6, 7, 8 of their leaders. But some of the pastors that we're encountering are bringing up to 40 or 50 people from their church. Sounds incredible, but I can give you names and badge numbers, and they find that the investment that they make in bringing that number of people to the summit is just huge. One regional denomination last year brought 30 of his senior pastors from 30 churches across New England, and he's bringing them back this year because of the impact that it had on them. So we made it very easy. I lost my slide, but I'll ask Mike if he can go on to challenge number 3. Too busy. What they saw was that they just had insufficient bandwidth. Now, one person in one sentence made it very, very clear. He said, look, I've got already too much on my plate. When I get back, I can't seem to even find time to think about those good ideas that I heard at the summit, let alone try them. How can I add more activity to my already overscheduled life? Well, I could certainly resonate to that because I've asked myself that several times myself. So again, we went back to the fact that each month we provide about 4 hours of quiet time away from their church, and we even try to wed them away from their smartphones and their cell phones and put them outside the room. Now that always doesn't work, but that's a little bit of humor that again we can all relate to. So each month we provide this quiet place. We were very insistent from the beginning that this would be a safe environment. Now by safe, I really mean confidential, so that anything that is said in that room is kept in that room. So basically what we do is we listen, we think, we write, and the pastors share and test their ideas, and when they walk out that door at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they leave the workshop with a written plan. Okay, I want us to step back take a deep breath, and I would like to walk you through what a typical post-summit leadership workshop is. Thanks, Mike. It begins at the summit, because if I know that you're going to the summit, and I have people at all three of the sites in New England, or three of the sites in New England, and I am at one of them, is I give them an 8.5 by 11 folder. Each one of the presentations has a single sheet, and on that single sheet, I have 5 short questions for them to answer. At the end of the presentation, they just write out the answers as they reflect back on this presentation on the sheet, and then they rate this presentation on a score of 1 to 10 of how relevant do I find that with this presentation in my church. And sure enough, as you might expect, I get some that come back and they say, oh, this was a 10, this is great. I get others to come back and say, well, this was a 1 for me. Well, that's fine, but they always are able to find some. And at the end of the summit, if you've been to one, you'll know that your brain is like porridge, because you've had all this high-powered stuff beamed to you over the past 2 days. You can't even remember for sure how to get home on Friday night. But I ask them to go back through their presentations, rank the presentations, and I tell them, look at the numbers on your upper right-hand corner and see how you rated that presentation. And write down on a questionnaire that I give them the top 5 presentations and hand that sheet in to me. Then I go back, and from each of the 3 sites that I have historically, or from each of the sites that I have historically got data from, I have picked 8 of the top presentations, and I deliver those once a month over the year. So the post-summit leadership workshops begin really at the summit. Then I come to the workshops. They start early in September, and I spend 4 hours on the very top presentation. And they focus on their situation, their need, their challenge as evoked by that presentation to them at the workshop. We re-listen to the complete DVD, and again, we take notes. Now, the 5 questions that I give them again are expanded a fair amount, and it typically takes them about 25 minutes to fill out the answer to these questions. But they identify their one big idea, they answer 5 questions about that one big idea, and then we stop, take a break, and share them all on a flip chart. Then we usually have some food to get some sugar back into our system, and when we come back, we answer about 2 more pages of, well, okay, if that's my big idea, what could I do in my church? No, I'm going to go back, Mike, if you could. I don't know who clicked that. One more. Keep going back. Whoops, I think you're going ahead. Can you go back to, I would say, about slide number 9? Yeah, that's it. You got it. I was really chatting about the fact that we spend about 2 pages expanding on what could I do, what would I do? If I had a sort of a blank sheet of paper, what would I do? What could I do? What should I do? Those kinds of questions. One of the questions is, what should I not do? So we explore a fair amount, and then finally at the final half hour of the workshop, we ask the question, well, how am I going to get that done? And I get them to list the resources that they have available to them. And first of all, they start off internally. Yeah, well, within my church, I don't have many resources. Some say they don't have many leaders. And I say, well, all right, what external resources could you take? But write them all down, even if you think that they're not what you wish they were, and they're certainly not what they are at Willow Creek, but write them down. And it is amazing, because I get them to share what these answers to their questions are in a summary. That usually takes about, at that point I usually take about 45 minutes to summarize what everybody is saying. And then we break for lunch. And one of the fascinating things is that at least one of the attendees over the years has come back to me and said, you know, the most productive part of that workshop, nothing against the workshop, is the lunch, because the the uh, the dialogue with my peers is probably one of the things that I enjoy most. Now, just to close off what a post-summit leadership workshop looks like, I take down all of that information. I take down all of the uh, of the of the big ideas in 1 or 2 points, and then I take down what their expanded uh, summary is of the plans that they're going to do back at their church. I write that up in a document and I send it back to them confidentially in the email within 1 or 2 days. And the other thing is a surprising one that we've developed over the past 2 or 3 years is what has become known as the accountability presentation. And that is essentially each of the attendees at some time during the year gives about a half-hour presentation on how he has implemented his big idea within his church. So I'm going to skip over and talk a little bit about benefits, and we're going to be wrapping up this session in, I'd say about seven minutes. So there's the benefits slide. We have made it easy, and we have encouraged pastors to bring staff and leaders to the GLS. We've done that through group discounts, through our promotion, and I'm here today to suggest that virtually with all of the evaluation sheets that I have handed out, we are being told that we have successfully addressed all of the challenges that were barriers to the Global Leadership Summit. And that is probably one of the most satisfying aspects of these. But we go on and we talk about how they put it into work. And I lead a facilitated discussion. One of the things I tell people is, look, I'm not a pastor. I don't have any answers. So you guys have to provide the answers. And so we give them a safe place, and they talk, write down, and identify, and absorb, and retain. They throw ideas up on the board. They throw ideas on the table, and essentially they develop a big idea for their church. Now, some of these are really wild because they think, this is crazy. I could never do this. The amazing thing is that by the time they get done that particular session, they're thinking, this is not so bad. Thanks, Mike. This is not so bad. Whoops, no, if you can go back to somehow a mouse is getting into the system. If you can back up one slide to what I'd call the benefits slide. Great, thanks. By the time they finish that presentation, they have somehow felt that they really could do this, and they go back and work at it. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. But they address their issues, regardless of how wild, write a plan, and go back. And then sometime over the year, they demonstrate their accountability by coming back and giving typically a half-hour presentation. Some of them are so excited they want 2 presentations, and we're glad to accommodate them there. One of the really unintended consequences is the fact that I have seen trust develop over time across denominations. And at this point in time, especially seen over the past 3 years, we see pastors communicating in between workshops. We see them getting together on one-on-ones and having a lunch together to work through a particularly knotty problem. And in general, we have seen that the unity across the denominations is facilitated by these workshops. The relationships developed over time are another one of the benefits that I didn't foresee, but I certainly appreciate it. We've got about 4 minutes on my schedule, so if I could back you up, I just want to read some of the testimonies. Poor Mike, he's going to get a finger tired from backing up that mouse. But you can leave it up there if you want, but I prefer to think of the benefits. I'm going to start with the most commendable one and work down to some of the what I'd call a little more edgy, particularly with respect to the people like myself who present the workshops. The first one says, the primary benefit that I get come away with is I come away with clarity on how to proceed in dealing with the situations that I have in mind at my church. The next one was a little more honest, and he said, participation in these workshops is not easy for me. I would just like to come and sit back and listen, let it all soak in, think about it. Let me tell you, filling out the worksheets is work for me to think things through enough to the end. However, I have found that this is good for me, and I always come back to my church, encouraged, and I always come back with some very small action items, and that person has gone on to give one of the most creative accountability presentations that I have seen. The other person is a little more scary, because when you open yourself up to open answers, you get some real answers. He starts off and says, when the alarm goes off on the day of the workshop, I seriously do not believe that I have the time to go. But I always do, because of what I get out of those workshops. Every time, and he underscored it, every time I come away with something that I can apply back here at the church. Sometimes it's my big idea, and other times it's an idea that one of the other pastors has shared. Now, there have been several other general topics that they share of why they particularly enjoy the workshops. Encouragement comes up very often. Fellowship comes up. One of the explicit non-design goals of these workshops was the people we talked to said, we don't want another fellowship workshop. We've got a lot of those, and frankly, I don't get much out of them. But then, surprisingly, I mentioned accountability comes up as one of the reasons they particularly enjoy the workshop. And this is the one I like the very best, because I opened it up and I asked the question, are there any ways that you think we could improve the workshop? And this particular pastor wrote down, this may seem funny, but it's the mayonnaise on the sandwiches. I could eat mayonnaise, but I don't like it much. Mustard as an option would be good. Well, I'm here to tell you that we were able to solve that problem. So the next steps, if I could just move on, Mike, if I can finally ask you, this is it. I'd encourage you to register for the Global Leadership Summit. There's the link that you can take down, click on. I could even type it in from time to time. And when you get there, you click on register. You click on one more picture, register for the summit, and it says you can register at the premier host sites, but you can't register at Willow Creek. And find your preferred state, and for example, in the state of Massachusetts, there are 4 sites. You can click on the one, and the register, at least on my screen, is way over at the right-hand side. So that's how to register for the summit. If I could ask you to skip down then to the next one. 3 locations are currently planning to offer post-summit leadership workshops for the first time this year. I've held them for the past 5 years at Rehoboth, and I'm expanding it to the Pembroke site. For those of you who know the Pembroke Church, it's the North River Community Church, and Minden, Massachusetts site, which is the Bethany Community Church. And we offer 2 terms. We offer a fall term, which takes the top 4, and those are September through December, and the cost for that is $75 for that term. And in the winter, we take the next workshops. And I just want to, we have a few seconds here, I just want to expand into the relevance of the workshops clumps into 3 clumps. There are 2 or 3 sessions that are always at the very top. And then they drop down and they're clustered around, I would say, about, I would say 4 sessions that are sort of in the middle. And then there are always two or so that people really want to hear for very strongly, but there's not strongly felt support for them. So I generally try to run 8 seminar sessions, and we've actually run 9 on one year, and the cost is $75 per term. If I could go on to my contact information, you can contact me at Vision New England. You can send an email, and I will get back to you at least before July 30th. And you can leave a message on my voicemail at Vision New England at 928-978-929-9800. I'm at extension 6. So there you are. We have finished, according to my timing, in about 27 minutes, and we have something like 18 minutes of questions. So I'm going to open it up to you to ask any questions that you want. This is sort of like handing out a questionnaire at the end of a workshop, is that you okay. Mike muted me during that, and I guess that's the prerogative of a producer. But I'd like to hear any of the questions that you have. So go for it.
Jack, thank you very much. It was very informative. I hope everyone had a chance to kind of digest what you had to say. Currently, we do have one question. I'm going to ask Ryan Howell if he has a question to ask.
Hey, Jack, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Are you hearing me loud and clear?
Oh, yeah. So, hey, thanks
Great.
for joining us today. Jack, 2 questions for you. Number
Yes.
1, tell everybody a little bit about your past life, the work that you did prior to this, because I think it does really play into what your gifts and your strengths are in this area. You are really, not exaggerating, brilliant when it comes to strategic planning with folks. And so I think it'd be great for you to share a little bit about your past history in that world. And then also, could you give everybody, say, the 2 or 3, like, here's the most practical thing somebody could do to get the most out of the summit, whether they join a network, a workshop, but going into the summit, what's the best thing that they could do to prepare, to make sure that it's not just another event that they go to, but that they really do walk away with a good experience that actually does impact the real strength and growth of their church. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on those, and for you to share a little bit about your former life with everybody.
Well, thanks very much.
Muted.
Opening Pandora's box on my life is dangerous at the best of times, but I'll try to keep it to about 2 minutes. I graduated as an engineer, and I went to work for a high-tech company. And the first thing I found out is that high-tech companies were growing so fast and developing so many new ideas with new products that somebody had to go out and explain them to our customers. Now, the high-tech company that I joined was very, very technical in terms of it was a kind of computer that had not been marketed before. It was called an online computer. So I started my engineering career teaching, and then the salespeople out there said, well, would you come out and help me sell? So I went out and sold. And finally, one of the managers drew me into selling because I could go out and teach these people how to use this stuff. And I spent something like about 10 years in selling. And I began to get ideas on how that people should sell things. And I spent about the next 20 years or 10 years in marketing. And it was marketing research and promotion and advertising, what captured their interest. And then in the last 10 years of my career, it adds up to 37 years. I was a liaison between the business managers in our customers, and that is where I honed my appreciation for asking the customer what they want. And I worked at that for about 10 years and traveled around the world and did that in virtually all the 3 areas of the world. When I came to Vision New England, that was what I felt I could bring, is that I could drag myself up in front of customers that I had never met before, ask them questions, write down the answers, and come back and provide better products for Vision New England. So that is what I did, and I've spent 15 years doing that, and they have been one of the most rewarding 15 years of my life. And I've often said that the first 35 years of my career prepared me for my career with Vision New England. The 2 or 3 most practical things that you can do is, the very first one is so big I don't know how to get beyond the first one. But the first one is whatever you do, take good notes. As these people talk, start writing down, just writing down the points that you really think hit you. Because by the time you get to the end of the summit, you can't even remember what you had for breakfast the day before. So the practical thing I would encourage you to do is write down what you learned in that session. Write it down as you're listening to it, and relate it to your church. And the questions that I provide for the people who are using my notebooks is, I reflect back at the end of the idea and I said, what is one big idea for me? And then I asked the question, why is it important? What is the biblical support for that? And who in my church do I wish was sitting at my right elbow so I could dig my elbow in their ribs? I ask it a little more nicely than that, but that's really what I'm saying. And then I say, all right, what do I need to do about this when I get back? And those 5 questions, people have said, have changed the way that they reflect on the summit. So I think I've taken up my time on that question, but if you want me to expand on it, I will. But those are 2 things that I find are most helpful. Is you
Unmuted.
You're hearing, and you ask yourself questions that relate to your church. Maybe the other practical thing I do is a little would suggest is you put blinders on. You don't be blinded by 25,000 people sitting out there when you've got 120 sitting in your church.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be blinded by the lights and the sound that probably on any Sunday morning expend more dollars than you have on your church budget for the whole year.
Yeah.
Just don't think about that.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the answers that I'm sure you didn't expect to hear, but it is so true. Focus on what is relevant for you. That's what I did when I came to the summit, and I was able to use this even while I was working for Vision New England.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say, Jack, is focus on content and not context, because the context can be overwhelming.
Well said.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks, Jack. You know, if it's okay with you, Jack, I'd love for us to email those questions to the people who participated today, just in case they end up going. Those might be great things to just jot into a notebook for them. So if you'll email those over to us, we'll make sure we get that out to everybody in the post webinar email. So
I'll be glad to do that.
Awesome.
It's on my file. It'll take me about 90 seconds to mail it up to either you or Mike, or copy both of you. So I'll be glad to do that.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jack.
Now, any other?
Muted.
I think actually we're at a point now where we're going to just close the webinar, and just wanted to thank everyone for attending, and also just not to be overly marketing, but I am the marketing director, so I have to add a couple of things Vision New England wise, and really this is a couple of great resources for those pastoral leaders and leaders within the church. One really exciting program we're trying to launch this fall is our Vision 1 Pastor Coaching Network. It's really for pastors and church leaders. It's going to be launching this October, this fall, and we're going to have 4 cohort locations. It'll be in Fairfield, Connecticut, Boston North region, the Metro West area, Nashua, New Hampshire, and Portland, Maine. So be sure to check it out on our webpage. There's all kinds of information in terms of what the coaching network is going to provide and details about that. And really next month, we're hoping you can join us at the monthly webinar series. We're going to be having a 3-part series in August and into September that's really going to kind of talk about 3 key areas where you can be a more effective pastoral leader, and really key 1 is going to be pastoral spiritual formation. Key 2, we're going to talk about leadership principles, and key 3, we'll be talking about systems and structures that you can build into your church to be more effective. And each of those webinars are going to provide you insight into really what we're going to be covering during those coaching network series times. And last but not least, if you really enjoyed the webinar and want to help us maintain these, we are asking that if you have a chance and feel led that you could provide a donation to us, that'd be great. We are a nonprofit organization, and all our money does go to support in developing leadership principles in New England. And so just make sure you log right in there. And last but not least, we're going to just close in prayer. Again, thank you all for attending. And if you had any questions for Jack or myself, feel free to contact us offline. Father God, we just thank you today for all that you are and all that you're doing in New England and throughout the world. And just pray, Father God, that you would encourage us, Father, to grow and develop in our relationships with you and relationships with one another, Lord, that we might be more effective leaders and that we might be good stewards for what you provided. And pray that you would just be with Jack and the Strategic Leadership Network as they gear up for another ministry season, Father. We do thank you and praise you for your son, Jesus, and all that you're doing. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for attending, and hopefully we'll see you next month.